And then Cynthia Stewart came in and sat next to me. Sometimes, Cynthia was all right, but sometimes she wasn't. And this morning, she wasn't. "Hi, Bill," she said. "Hi, Cynthia." "Did you do your report?" "Almost." "I did mine last week. Do you want to see it?" I was just about to say, "No," but then I had an idea. Sometimes Mr. Revis liked us to stand up in front of the class and give oral reports on what we'd written about. And I thought to myself, if I read Cynthia's report, I know all about Zanzibar, and then if we had to give oral reports, I could just grab a bunch of paper that looked like a report, stand up in front of the class, say, "There's too much to read here, I'm just going to talk about the most important parts, talk about Zanzibar," and I'd be in the clear. "Sure, Cynthia," I said. "I'd love to see your report." Cynthia's report, it had one of those little clear blue plastic covers on the front. And the first page, it wasn't a report. It was a map. It was a map of Zanzibar. And Cynthia, it showed, all the population centers and all that stuff, the oceans and the rivers. And Cynthia, she had this big box of Crayola crayons, 128 colors, And she used every one of those 128 Crayola crayons on that map. You know how many crayons I had? 8. 4 brown, 2 yellow, a magenta, and a black. And her report was 9 typewritten pages long. I didn't know there was 9 typewritten pages about anything, let alone Zanzibar. I said, "Gosh, Cynthia, this report is incredible. Did your mother type it?" She said, "No, I did. I have my own typewriter." I hated Cynthia. Anyway, I read a report, at least the first couple pages before school started. Right there on page 2, it said something I didn't know about Zanzibar. It said they grew tea. Right away I started to sing. Zanzibar, they grow tea far away across the sea, off the coast of Africa. In Zanzibar, they grow tea. Zanzibar, stop it, I said. Cynthia said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing." I had to get all this stuff out of my system, all these stupid words about Zanzibar. I got out a scrap piece of paper, I wrote everything down, the whole stupid song about Zanzibar. I stuffed it in the bottom of my desk, just to get rid of it, just to get it out of my head. And school started. And I hadn't done any of my homework. We got through the first couple periods, classes, and then it was time for English when Mr. Revis was going to collect our poems, But that day, we were diagramming sentences. Diagramming sentences? You take all these words that are strung together in a sentence and you kill them. That's what you do. You kill them, kill them, kill them, kill them. And that's what we did all period. We killed these sentences. Mr. Revis loved to kill sentences. We were diagramming and doing all sorts of diagramming. He was jumping up and down and using the whole chalkboard. And then he said, "All right, class, let's go on to the next subject." Mr. Revis forgot to collect the poems. I loved it when he did that. I thought he was the best teacher in the whole world. I was in the clear. The only thing I had to do was stay in at recess, go down to the library, read about Zanzibar, write a report, and I'd be in the clear. Except I didn't. I went out and played a game of basketball, and my team won, and I played another one, and then it was time to come back in. And I hadn't done my report. And then we had health. I think they taught us how to brush our teeth that day. And then it was time for geography. Mr. Revis sat there on the desk talking about geography. And I started to watch the clock about halfway through the class, wondering to myself if maybe he'd do it twice in the same day. Forget to collect 2 homework assignments on the same day. I was hoping he would. And began to look like I was going to make it when he said, "All right, class, I'd like to collect your Zanzibar reports." And everybody lifted up their desks. I lifted up mine. Everybody rustled in their desks for the reports. I rustled in the desk for mine. And then I waited until the reports came over my shoulder. I took them, I messed around them in the desk, and I put the desktop down and straightened them out so it looked like my report was in there someplace. Then I handed him up. Mr. Evans, he walked across the room aisle by aisle, collecting the reports, looking through them, until he got to my aisle, and for some reason, he stopped. And he said, "Bill, where's your report?" "Huh?" Your report. Your report, where is it?" "Oh," I said, "it's not there." "I can see that," he said. "Did you do your Zanzibar report?" I said, Oh, you mean that report on Zanzibar?" He said, "Yes. Did you do it?" I did it, really. I was almost done, but then this guy came into my room last night with a gun and said he was going to tie me up in a chair and cut off my toes and shave my hair if I didn't give it to him. I sold it to Newsweek for $1 million. On my way into school, I dropped it and got run over by a Big Mac truck. Mr. Revis said, "Bill, do you have your Zanzibar report?" Not quite." "Bill," Mr. Revis said, "this report was assigned several weeks ago. Everybody in this class has been studying Zanzibar. We've been studying Africa. We've been studying Zanzibar. I wanted everybody in this class to know something about Zanzibar. I wanted you to do a report on Zanzibar. Everybody here has done a report on Zanzibar. Can't you tell me anything about Zanzibar? I wanted everybody to do this report on Zanzibar. Why didn't you do your report on Zanzibar?" Well, you know, he's yelling at me, "Zanzibar, Zanzibar." I'm thinking to myself, "Zanzibar, Zanzibar, Zanzibar." He says, "What?" "Oh, nothing." "Bill, what were you just doing?" The kid behind me, he says, "He was singing, Mr. Revis." "Oh," says Mr. Revis, "you're singing." "I'm talking to you about your failure to do your homework and you're singing." "Yeah." "Perhaps you'd like to tell me what you were singing about?" "Mr. Revis, I'm real sorry. It's just this stupid song about Zanzibar." "Oh," he said, "you don't have your report on Zanzibar, but you have a little song for us. Perhaps you'd like to sing it for the class." "Gosh, thanks, but I don't think so." Everybody in the class says, "Sing it!" Except for Cynthia Stewart. She said, "Oh, this is just ridiculous." Mr. Evans said, "Bill, and honestly, I can't tell you why, but I stood up and I walked to the front of the class. Zanzibar, Zanzibar, Zanzibar is very far. You can't get there in a car. It's too far to Zanzibar. In Zanzibar they don't have tar to put on roads to drive their cars. Men and women smoke cigars. There's no tar in Zanzibar. Zanzibar they grow clothes. What they're for I don't know. Maybe they put them between their toes. In Zanzibar they grow clothes. In Zanzibar they grow ground nuts. People who grow them live in huts. In Zanzibar there's sugar cane to grow it. They need lots of rain. Zanzibar they grow tea far away across the sea, off the coast of Africa. Zanzibar they grow tea. Zanzibar, Zanzibar, Zanzibar is very far. You can't get there in a car. It's too far to Zanzibar. The whole class went nuts. Yay! Except for Cynthia. She said, Mr. Revis, that's not true. That's not true. There is tar in Zanzibar. It's on page 4 of my report." And Jimmy Albert said, "Oh, Cynthia, shut up." And Mr. Revis sat on his desk with his head in his hands. He used to sit like that a lot, especially in the late part of the day. You know, sometimes he'd be sitting like that when the final bell would ring, and we'd leave the room and come in the next morning. He'd still be sitting there looking just like that. Sometimes, you know, we'd be sitting in class, and we know we were supposed to go on to the next subject, but Mr. Revis would be sitting like that, and somebody'd lean over to me and poke me and say, "Hey, Bill, do you think he's still alive?" "I don't know," I said. "I can't see if he's breathing." They said, "Go touch him." I said, No, just leave him there. Let the principal find him." Mr. Revis sat like that, with his head in his hands. He dropped his hand, he looked up at me, gave me this half smile, this smirk, and shook his head like he didn't know what to do with me. And the bell rang. I thought, "Oh, brother, thank goodness." I got up to go. He said, "Wait a minute, class." I forgot to collect your poems. Please hand them in. He was looking right at me. I walked right back to my desk. I tell you something, I was going to hand something in just to get out of there. You might find out later it wasn't the homework assignment, but I was going to hand something in because I didn't want to fight with him twice in 30 seconds. I went back to my desk. I reached deep in my desk. I pulled out a piece of paper. I looked at it. It was that scrap paper. I'd written all the words down to Zanzibar. I handed it up, put my name on it. I ran out the door. I got on the bus. I was depressed. I was. I said to myself, Bill, what's the matter with you? I said, I don't know. He said, why didn't you do your homework? I said, I don't know. I just couldn't do it. I mean, I could do it if I'd sat down, but I couldn't sit down to do it. What? No, I know. It's not like the homework was that hard. It's just like it was hard to sit down and do. Like it's just hard to make yourself do it when there's nobody standing over you. It's not that hard to do, but it's hard to start and sit down and do it. I said, Bill, that's stupid. I said, no, it's not. It's true. And it is true, you know. When there's nobody sitting there, it's hard to make yourself do something. It's the hardest thing in the world. Well, anyway, that night, I did my homework except for that poem. I tried. I just couldn't write anything. I got in the next morning, and Mr. Revis, you know, he must have been up all night the night before grading the papers because they were all back on the desks. And I was walking across the room and everybody saying, I got this and I got that. And what'd you get? What'd you get? And I hate that. I walked across the room. I saw on my desk there was some paper. I thought, boy, great way to start a Friday, 2 Fs. I walked over. The first piece of paper there was that scrap paper. I had written all the words down to Zanzibar. I picked it up. Mr. Revis had written on it, very creative poem, B+. Mr. Revis, he thought the song was a poem. He gave me a B+ for a song. He thought it was a poem. Well, I guess it was a poem now that I looked at it. I mean, it rhymed and everything. But there was still that other piece of paper. And it wasn't mine, I knew, because I didn't hand it in. I walked over, picked it up, had Mr. Revis's little tight handwriting on it. At the top it said, Bill Harley. Underneath that it said, Zanzibar Report. And beneath that he'd written, your oral report on Zanzibar is good work, except that Cynthia is right. There is tar in Zanzibar, B-. I got a B- for a report I didn't do. I looked up, Mr. Revis was looking at me. He said, never again, Bill. Oh, I couldn't believe it. Cynthia Stewart waltzed in, picked up her paper and said, I got an A, Bill, what'd you get? I said, I got a B-, Cynthia, isn't that great? Because I didn't care what Cynthia got. You know, I mean, she deserved what she got because she did a lot of work. She deserved an A, but that didn't bother me at all because I was thinking, you know, anybody could do a report with 128 Crayola crayons, but I didn't do that. I did something that nobody else did. I wrote a song. Now, the fact is, it's still hard for me to sit down and do stuff by myself with nobody telling me to do it. But the one thing I have learned is that the things I most want to do are things that nobody tells me to do but myself. So I had to learn how. Like sitting down and telling this story to you. Zanzibar, Zanzibar, Zanzibar is very far. You can't get there in a car. It's too far to Zanzibar.